High flight of the heart. Rosie took a deep breath and faced her opponent, the winding path leading to the house. She couldn't allow herself to hope too much. She needed closure. Behind her, the futuristic city of London too buzzed as the day came to a close. She took a step forward. On either side of the path, colorful flowers made of cogs, springs, and tin dotted the astroturf. She remembered helping Georgie paint those flowers, how Georgie had laughed, paint streaked across her cheeks, at a joke Rosie had told. It was in that moment Rosie realized she loved her. Georgie, with her dark eyes, turquoise curls, and a gentle touch that seemed to bring warmth to everything it brushed. Rosie admired the way Georgie wore her leather jackets with loose, paint-stained dungarees, and the fearless way she spoke her mind. But most of all, Rosie cherished how Georgie made her feel seen. She took another step, her hands trembling. She walked past the wire tree with its light bulb fruit, past the small pot of real tulips, flowers she had insisted on planting in a world where most things were synthetic. Their neighbor, Martin, must have taken Rex for a walk, or else the robotic dog would have bounded out, wagging its tail and clanking with every step. Closer now, she could hear the radio playing free jazz, Louisa's favorite. Rosie would have cursed the genre under her breath if the music hadn't helped distract her from the nerves curling in her stomach. She was nearly at the door, close enough to smell the scent of freshly cut synthetic grass. Suddenly, the door swung open and there stood Georgie, her teal curls tousled and messy, wearing a pair of fluffy Moomin pajamas. Rosie's mind went blank. Getting ready for bed already, parrots?" she blurted out. Georgie grinned, her eyes twinkling. "Most people say hello, you know." Rosie laughed awkwardly. She followed Georgie around to the side of the house, where they tossed a trash bag down the chute, and then they made their way inside. Louisa, Georgie's mom, greeted Rosie warmly. "Oh, Rosie, it's been too long. I thought you didn't like my cooking anymore." Rosie smiled sheepishly. "Impossible, Louisa. No one makes paella as good as you." Louisa beamed, waving them into the basement with a flour-covered hand. Georgie led the way, rolling her eyes playfully. "Suck up," she whispered as they descended. When they reached Georgie's room, Rosie took a breath, trying to steady her voice. "So, I thought we could hang out, maybe head to our spot. It's been a while." Georgie raised an eyebrow, but then her expression softened. "Yeah, okay. Let me grab my stuff." Rosie watched as Georgie changed out of her pajamas. In no time they were on their way, walking through the golden evening glow, past rows of sleek homes with hovercars, through busy streets, and further still into the old parts of town where nature was reclaiming the ruins. Their destination was a secret place by the city's edge, near the fence that marked the boundary of the metropolis. Hidden by shrubs with a tree leaning over a little river, the spot was quiet, with the sound of water and wind whispering through the leaves. Georgie flung her backpack down and gestured to the rope swing that dangled from the tree. "Fight you for it?" Rosie laughed, knowing she'd win. Despite her bravado, Georgie always lost their little tussles, being lighter and smaller. But Rosie played along, and they grappled until they nearly tumbled into the river. When they stopped, they were both out of breath and giggling, the sound echoing in the quiet of the evening. Rosie relaxed for a moment, but then she felt a splash of cold water, and suddenly she was pulled into the river. She came up spluttering, laughing. "Georgie, you absolute dork." Georgie's laughter rang out as Rosie swam after her, splashing water until they both climbed out, soaked and shivering. As the rain began to fall, Rosie wrapped herself in a towel. Georgie tossed her way, the droplets catching the last of the sunlight. Rosie accused playfully, "You planned this." Georgie's reply came softly, I planned more than that. Rosie looked up, her breath catching as she saw Georgie standing close, her cheeks flushed in the fading light. Her words lingered in the air, unspoken but heavy with meaning. Georgie turned away quickly, pretending to be busy with her bag. Before Rosie could second-guess herself, she closed the distance between them. Their faces were so close, Rosie could see the rain pooling in Georgie's eyelashes. Georgie looked back up at her, and for a moment they just stared, each waiting for the other to speak. Rosie took a deep breath. So, I like you. Like really like you. And I know this is probably weird, but... Georgie's laughter interrupted her, and before Rosie could spiral into panic, Georgie reached out and brushed a wet strand of hair from Rosie's face. Just kiss me already. Rosie's heart leapt and she leaned in, pressing her lips softly to Georgie's. It was simple, pure. A promise of a beginning. Georgie's lips were cool from the rain, but they warmed against hers. When they broke apart, Georgie's eyes shone with the golden glow of the sunset. Rosie smiled, feeling a weight lift from her chest. So, can we maybe do that again? Georgie chuckled, pulling her back down beside her on the soft mossy bank. Yeah, I think we can manage that. They lay back on the towel, staring up at the sky as the rain fell gently around them. The river murmured nearby, and the city seemed a world away. Georgie started reciting one of her favorite poems, her voice quiet against the backdrop of the night. With silent, lifting mind I've trod the high untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. Rosie smiled, her heart full, and reached for Georgie's hand. They lay like that, side by side, knowing that whatever came next, they had this moment, this little corner of the world that was just theirs. Rosie squeezed Georgie's hand gently as the rain continued to fall around them, each drop sending tiny ripples through the river below. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting Georgie's voice wash over her as the words of the poem faded into the sound of raindrops hitting the water. There was something comforting about Georgie's presence, like a fire that warmed without burning. Georgie shifted beside her, turning her head to look at Rosie, who still had her eyes closed. You know, you're pretty brave for coming here tonight. Rosie opened her eyes, meeting Georgie's curious gaze. Brave? I don't know about that. I was terrified. Terrified, but still here. And I think that counts for something. Georgie's voice softened, and she gave Rosie's hand another squeeze. Rosie looked away, feeling the heat rising to her cheeks again. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted with deep purples and soft oranges. She didn't quite know what to say to that. Words had always come so easily when she was with Georgie, but tonight everything felt different. They lay in silence for a while, just listening to the sounds of the evening. Rosie found herself tracing patterns in the raindrops on the towel between them, and she wondered how she had gotten so lucky to have a friend like Georgie, to have found the courage to take that leap tonight. After a few minutes, Georgie spoke again, her voice barely more than a whisper. I've been wanting to tell you for ages, you know. Rosie turned back to her, eyebrows furrowing in confusion. Tell me what? Georgie chuckled a little nervously and looked up at the sky, avoiding Rosie's gaze. That I like you too. More than just as a friend. I just didn't know how to say it. I thought you might think it was weird or that it would mess things up between us. And I didn't want to lose what we had, you know. Rosie's heart skipped a beat, and she reached up to brush a stray curl away from Georgie's face. Yeah, I know. I felt the same way. Georgie's eyes finally met hers again, and this time there was a vulnerability there that Rosie hadn't seen before. It was like they were both standing on the edge of something something beautiful and new and a little bit terrifying. But as Georgie smiled softly at her, Rosie realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. She shifted closer, their shoulders touching as they lay on the damp towel, and she let herself smile back. "I guess we were both a little scared, huh?" Georgie nodded, then she laughed, the sound bright and clear against the murmur of the river. "Yeah, a lot scared. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's part of figuring all this out." Rosie hummed in agreement, then turned her head to look back up at the sky. The first stars had appeared, twinkling against the deepening blue. She thought about how much had changed between them in the space of just one evening, and how much more she still wanted to share with Georgie. Her mind wandered to all the small moments they'd had together, and she found herself longing for more of them. More late-night walks, more silly jokes, more quiet afternoons spent painting flowers and fixing broken things. Georgie shifted beside her, propping herself up on one elbow. "What are you thinking about?" Rosie smiled at the question, then turned her head to meet Georgie's gaze. "I'm thinking that I'd like to be around you a lot more. If that's okay with you." Georgie's smile widened and she leaned in closer, their foreheads almost touching. "Yeah, I'd like that too." They stayed like that for a while, sharing the quiet, the rain falling softly around them, the city far away. It felt like they had created a little world just for themselves. A place where time slowed and where the future felt like something they could build together, one small brave step at a time. After a while, Georgie nudged her gently. "Hey, you're getting all sentimental on me, Rosie. Should I be worried?" Rosie rolled her eyes but couldn't help the laugh that bubbled up. "Oh, hush. I'm allowed to be a little sappy after confessing my feelings, okay?" Georgie grinned, the teasing glint in her eyes softened by the warmth of her smile. Yeah, fair enough." They both laughed and the sound felt like a promise, something bright and unbroken, echoing through the night. Then Georgie sat up and extended a hand to Rosie, helping her to her feet. The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving everything around them glistening in the starlight. Rosie took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. She glanced back at the river, the water now calm and reflecting the stars overhead, and then back at Georgie. It was strange, she thought, how much lighter she felt now. Like something heavy had been lifted off her shoulders. And maybe, just maybe, that weight had been replaced by something better. Georgie looked at her, raising an eyebrow. "Ready to head back?" Rosie nodded but then paused, looking down at their intertwined fingers. "Yeah, but can we come back here again? Soon?" Georgie's expression softened, and she gave Rosie's hand a gentle squeeze. "Of course. This place is ours after all." Rosie smiled, her heart full, and together they walked back through the quiet, rain-soaked ruins, their footsteps leaving a trail in the softened earth. And as they made their way back to the city, Rosie couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they had found something worth holding on to.